Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy. We just started the live streaming just to a little bit early just to give it that time so that we get caught up with the lag.
And just so you know, I will open the clerk's inbox.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we are at 3:58. I do see that we have our applicants here. All of our pre-registered members of the public are also here in the waiting room, except for one. But I do have her phone number to call her. She wasn't sure if she would have trouble logging in as she's out of town right now. So whenever you wish to proceed, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd like to proceed and first welcome everyone and call the meeting to order. And I notice now we have a quorum. And to start the meeting, I'd like to just make an introduction as to what has been done and the process, and we'll start with that. This is an electronic hearing of the Committee of Adjustments for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present and viewing at home will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address all comments and questions through the chair, that's myself. This public meeting has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and Council bylaws. Now, notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 60 meters, 200 feet of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands and information has been provided on the Committee of Adjustments webpage. So agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should an application be approved. Voicing objections, I must note, does not adversely affect the committee's decision. So if you have anything to comment on or object, feel free. Now, the process, the purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to participate in the meeting. Now, if you've pre-registered to speak during the public portion of the application, you will be brought into the Zoom meeting and will be unmuted. Yep, and for the record, would you please state your name and mailing address? And please be advised, once you have finished speaking, you will be removed from the Zoom meeting room. If you are live streaming at home and wish to submit a comment during an application, you may do so by emailing the clerks, that's CLERKS @pelham.ca. At the conclusion of the public portion of the meeting, these comments will be read into the record. If you submit comments after the public portion has been closed, your comments will not be considered. So you got to do it during the public portion. At the conclusion of discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise any applicable conditions. Specific wording for conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of this meeting. Copies of the decision will be mailed to the applicant or to your agent and to any other person who files a written request. If you wish to be provided a copy of the decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. The Secretary Treasurer's contact information is available on the upcoming PowerPoint presentation and available on the town's website. Any person, corporation, or public body has a right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of the consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision, minor variance, and 20 days of the mailing of the decision for consent applications. Now, there's also some additional, because this is Zoom, it's not quite like if we were in the boardroom. Just to let you know that this meeting is being conducted by the Zoom webinar and is also being live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. You may wish to put your view on gallery view by clicking the top right corner from the speaker view. We ask that you are mindful of background noise for the duration of the meeting, so any noise you make will be heard. Committee members are asked to mute their microphones until they are asked to speak. Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak and vote by raising your hand. And please note that attendees who have registered will remain in the waiting room via telephone or electronically until the application of interest is brought to the committee. Those participating online via Zoom will be asked by the chair to raise their virtual hand when they wish to speak. On a computer, you can do so by clicking participants in the bottom center corner of this screen, and then clicking raise hand. And I'll hopefully, if I miss something, somebody will remind me to have a look. On a mobile device, you can tap raise hand on the bottom left corner. Then you will be called upon to speak and your microphone will be unmuted by the staff. If you are participating by phone, you will be unmuted by staff when the agenda item that you have registered is being discussed. Applicants, agents, and attendees are advised that they are free to leave the webinar once a decision has been made on your application. So, okay. So now I'd like to introduce our panel. So I am John Clausen. Then I have, that's me, Bernie Law. Give a little wave, Bernie. And then Sandra Marsh. And then I think I saw, see, there was Sarah Leach. I don't see her. And then Nancy Bezzato. And I saw there Curtis Thompson, but I guess we're all on the screens of our computers. Now, at this time, I'd like to ask all our members if there's any pecuniary interest in any of the applications that we have today. I have none. Bernie?
I also have none.
And Sandra?
I also have none.
Okay. Now I'll ask Holly, has there been any requests for withdrawals or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there are not.
Okay, then I would like to begin. And if with the agenda, we would like to start with the minor variance application A20-2020P. That's 110 Canberra Road. And I would ask Holly to now proceed to go through with the nature and extent of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee of Adjustment hearing, Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. All Town of Pelham in-person Committee of Adjustment hearings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all Committee of Adjustment hearings electronically via Zoom. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Participants are reminded, ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you will be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participant microphones and video cameras will remain off until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphones will be muted. Once voting on an item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you will be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note, comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and person be asked to leave. Application for minor variance. File A20/2020P 1010 Canberra Road. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the south side of Canberra Road, lying east of Victoria Avenue, known locally as 1010 Canberra Road, in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 7.3E minimum side yard, seeking 7.3 meters, whereas 15 meters is required. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Department. Building permits are required. Public Works Department. No comments. Public. No comments. Niagara Region. No objections, provided a new septic system permit is issued and installed, and the proposed foundation is constructed using a similar floating slab anchor post layout that was provided for the recently approved greenhouse addition in accordance with the site plan agreement. Is the variance minor in nature? The reduction of the minimum side yard setback is minor overall because no sensitive land uses are approximate, and what appears to be an unopened road allowance continues to provide an additional 20 meters of separation between the adjacent property to the east. Planning staff are of the opinion the zoning request is minor in nature. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? The reduction of the minimum side yard setback is desirable because it will allow for improved usage of the existing and recently approved greenhouse expansion. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The variance maintains the general purpose and intent of the official plan because it supports the existing agricultural greenhouse operation. The rural community character will be maintained. The use is permitted and no adverse impacts are anticipated regarding water quality, hydrogeology, and stormwater runoff. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The variance maintains the general intent of the zoning bylaw because the requested side yard setback reduction still leaves adequate space for passage, negative drainage, and spatial separation between adjacent land uses. Planning staff are of the opinion the proposal applies current planning and development principles dealing with appropriate agricultural development and making efficient use of the existing agricultural parcel, which currently was not being farmed for crops. The proposed minor variance should not negatively impact the surrounding land uses with regards to land use incompatibility, odor, and stormwater runoff. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application number A20/2020P be approved subject to the following conditions. That all necessary building permits are required prior to construction commencing to the satisfaction of the chief building official. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, obtain building permit approval, ensuring that a floating slab and anchor post layout foundation are used similar to the approved on the existing site plan agreement to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. If you wish to receive a copy of the Notice of Decision, please contact the Secretary-Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Pizzato, Secretary-Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, and J. Pizzato at pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, would there be any comments from any of the committee members? Do we have any questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have the applicant join us. I don't know if he wishes to speak more on his application or if he is satisfied with what I've read into the record.
Yeah, well, I see there, Ed Slappendale, yes. I will ask you if you have any further comments as to your application that could make things work better for you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mostly, this would be just an extension for work area on the east side of the greenhouse. We kind of changed the way we were going to do the benches in our existing range we did. So this would just be a service area for working, for accessing a lot of it. The road allowance there doesn't it seems like a long way away, but yeah, with the 15 meters that just came into play. Otherwise, everything looks like lots of room on that side. So, and farm behind us has been farming or has put up greenhouses over that at the south end towards far. So I think in the past, I think 2002, the town of Pelham had made adjustments for that end of it as well. So yeah, I think most of it's been covered otherwise.
I gather your mentions the business is running good then.
Yes, we've been having a half decent year considering all the abnormalities of this year.
I have no further comment. I ask Sarah, have you got any questions, or Bernie, have you got any? Sandra or Bernie, if you have any questions.
No, I don't. After a visual of the property on Canberra Road is my first comment. It's a fabulous piece of farm business, and it's really good for Fenwick to have Ed looking after this premise, and I think he's done a great job. And I think the minor variances are as agreed. I think all four of them are minor in nature. Therefore, I agree with this application.
Sandra, have you got any questions?
I do, through the chair. The unopened road allowance that abuts the property, is that currently owned by the town? And if so, had you thought about purchasing that from the town or approached the town about it?
When I had discussions with the town, they weren't even 100% sure as to how it was labeled. On my deed, it does have it as a road allowance. I was just kind of recommended that minor variance would be the easiest route to go.
That's an interesting point, Ed. You're saying that road allowance can in actual fact be your property.
Possible, I guess. If that's going to take longer, though, I don't know.
I understand. If there's no further questions, I ask, have there been any emails that have been presented during this portion, Holly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have had no members of the public pre-register, and we will just check the Pelham clerk's email. And it is 4:15, and I see no emails, Mr. Chair.
Well, then I would like to close this portion of the public meeting. And if our members have no other further comments, then I would like to have someone make a recommendation as to this application. Do I have someone making, Sandra?
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion that this application be granted.
And do I have a seconder?
Yes, sir.
Bernie, then I'll ask that we bring the motion to vote. All in favor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, did you want to list some potential reasons and conditions?
Oh, yeah. The only conditions that I see is the building permit and the design structure that he agreed to with the town of Pelham when he had a site plan control. I don't see any other further conditions that I'd like. Sandra or Bernie, have you feel any other conditions apply?
No.
No, I do not.
So Holly, we're not going to add anything more than what's already been written.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. And perhaps Ms. Marsh has some reasons for her motion.
I do. The application for the minor variance for the side yard of 7.3 meters is granted for the following reasons. The variance is minor in nature as there's no sensitive land issues that are close by. The intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained and the official plan is maintained. and the proposal is desirable for the land as it will allow improved usage of the existing greenhouse and new expansion. And this application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. No objections were received. The applicant is also aware that a new septic permit is required, and the Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance and supporting analysis recommendation, and that this application meets the planning test for minor variance. The conditions that go with this application are that building permits are obtained to the satisfaction of the chief building official, and that prior to obtaining the building permit, the satisfaction of the director of the community planning, that a floating slab and anchor post layout foundation are used.
Okay, and that was seconded by Bernie. I gather now we can vote on the issue. All in favor that we grant this, raise your hand. The motion is granted. So this portion of the meeting is closed. And I thank Mr. Slattendale for his attendance and bringing his voice to the, shall we say, the pulpit, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Holly, we start then with the next application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are just bringing in the next applicant into the meeting, and we will be just sharing our screen for the PowerPoint presentation. Just give us a moment, please. And I will just read in the introductory remarks while that happens. Participants are reminded, please ensure that your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you would be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participant microphones and cameras will remain off until you are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphone will be muted. Once voting on an item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you will be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note, comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting. Otherwise, they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Application for minor variance, file A21/2020P, 590 Canberra Road. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the southeast corner of Canberra Road and Cream Street, known locally as 590 Canberra Road in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 7.4E, minimum exterior side yard, seeking 2.43 meters, whereas 8 meters is required to recognize the existing legal non-complying dwelling, and Section 7.4E, minimum exterior side yard, seeking 3.85 meters, whereas 3 meters is required to construct a 56.4 meter square two-story residential addition to the north. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Department. Building permits are required. Public Works Department. Should a new driveway be needed or the existing driveway widened, then a driveway entrance and culvert permit will be required via the Public Works Department at the owner's expense. Public, no comments. Niagara Region. No objections provided a new septic system be issued and installed in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. MPCA, no objections. Is the variance minor in nature? The reduction of the minimum exterior yard setbacks are minor overall because it will help improve the historic streetscape, which is characterized by many homes built close to the road. The proposed addition is logical extension of the existing dwelling in that it will help to preserve the balance of the subject lands, private sewage system servicing, and landscaped amenity areas. The proposed addition is also at a larger setback than the existing legal non-complying front yard setback, which has not posed any adverse impacts to date. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? The reduction of the minimum exterior side yard setback is desirable because it will allow for improved living arrangements and usage of the existing legal non-complying dwelling. The proposed addition also has the potential to improve the Cream Street public streetscape if subject to appropriate urban design treatments, which are desirable in the condition of approval. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The minor variance maintains the general purpose and intent of the official plan because it does not compromise the rural character of the neighborhood, nor does it prevent the ability for the site from being adequately serviced with private septic system. The rural community character will be maintained and the use is permitted, and no adverse impacts are anticipated regarding water quality, hydrogeology, and stormwater runoff. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The variance maintains the general intent of the zoning bylaw because the requested setback reduction recognizes the existing legal non-complying dwelling and allows for the logical and appropriate extension of the dwelling while still maintaining adequate setbacks from the traveled roadway and usable land for the private system. Town of Pelham staff are of the opinion the proposed addition to the north is logical and rather efficient use of the existing dwelling in order to gain additional living space and improved use of the property. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development principles dealing with the appropriate rural residential development and making efficient use of the existing undersized rural residential parcel. The proposed minor variance should not negatively impact the surrounding land's uses with regards to the land use incompatibility, privacy, and stormwater runoff. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with provincial policy statements and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application A21/2020P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant, at the time of building permit, provide a West Cream Street elevation plan that positively contributes to the public street through the use of a more practical front porch and the ground floor windows symmetrically proportionate to the building's mass, to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. Cease excavation activities immediately upon discovery of deeply buried archaeological resources. The Archaeological Program Unit of the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Cultural Industries shall be notified, and a licensed archaeologist is required to carry out an archaeological assessment in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act and the standards and guidelines for consultant archaeologists. In the event that human remains are encountered during construction, all activity must cease immediately, and the local policies, as well as the Cemetery Regulations Unit of the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, must be contacted. In situations where human remains are associated with archaeological resources, MTCS should also be notified to ensure that the site has not subject to unlicensed alterations, which would be in contravention of the Ontario Heritage Act. If you wish to receive a copy of the Notice of Decision, please contact the Secretary-Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary-Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, and jbizzato@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found at the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do believe that we do have the applicant and the agent joining the meeting. Just give us just one moment to provide them access for speaking.
Thank you. Are we ready to proceed, Holly?
I do see that we have Kaylee in here, and I'm just looking for Ian. Have you unmuted yourselves?
I have unmuted myself.
Thank you, Ian.
I'm unmuted as well.
Wonderful. Mr. Chair, we're ready to go.
Okay, I welcome you today, and before I would ask that either Ian or Kayla would like to address us, and have they got any comments with regard to their addition? Give us any more information that maybe we don't have.
It's Ian speaking through you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add that, the owner would like to add an addition. And that addition is actually inset of the existing structure that is legal non-compliant. And basically we're going to be doing the addition to the north, and with the bylaw at the 8 meters, it wouldn't actually touch the building. So we're just looking for relief from the exterior side yard.
How large is the property?
Let me just grab the survey. The property is 329.
It's approximately 1.3 acres.
1.3 acres.
Approximately. The survey will be there, but
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I can't understand why they say it's undersized. I think most of the parcels in that area are 1 acre or a little better. Or am I? I'm just asking, guys. I'm just reading when I'm reading this.
Yeah,
I live right around the corner from the site. I didn't see any real problem, but Bernie or Sandra, do you have any questions? I have no other questions at all.
I have no questions.
Well, if no questions, I would comment that, well, I don't see any reason not to grant it. Would somebody make a comment as to whether we grant it or not, or make a proposal? Okay, go ahead, Sandra.
I will make the motion that application for the minor variance for the minimum exterior side yard 2.43 existing and new 3.85 meters be granted for the following reasons. The variance is minor in nature as it will improve the historic streetscape, and currently there's no negative impacts to date. The intent of the zoning bylaws maintained and the intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the land as it will allow improve to the living arrangement and usage of the land. This application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. No objections were received, and the applicant is aware that a new septic system permit is required. And the Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report and analysis and recommendation, and that this application meets the Planning Act test for the minor variance. The application is granted with the following conditions: that building permits are obtained to the satisfaction of the chief building official, and that prior to the building permit being issued, that if a new or widened driveway is required, that an entrance and culvert permit is obtained to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, and that to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning, that an elevation plan is provided, and that if any archaeological items are found during excavation, the excavation must cease and the ministry will be contacted immediately.
Do I have a seconder?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Law, you are muted, so we can't hear you. If you wanted to unmute when you're speaking, please. Just give us one moment, Mr. Law. We may be able to have the abilities to unmute you on our end. Okay, Mr. Law, you might get a pop-up that says, please unmute. You would say yes? So, Mr. Law, you should be receiving a message perhaps on your screen saying that we've asked you to unmute yourself. If you can see that and say yes or okay. So, sorry, Mr. Law, we can't hear you. Can you just raise your hand if you will second Ms. Marsh's motion? Can you just raise your hand if you agree and you wish to second Ms. Marsh's motion? We can't hear you. You're muted. Okay, so I do see your hand raised, and I take that you would like to second the motion. If you could just nod your head, yes. Okay, thank you. We'll take that as the seconder. And if Ms. Marsh would like to go, sorry, Ms. Marsh, you did read your reasons and your conditions in. Mr. Chair, you could call for a vote. I would just ask that, Mr. Law, if you agree to please raise your hand and nod yes.
All those in favor of granting the motion, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr.
Motion
Law. We
granted.
see that as an agreement. Thank you.
Now, I think we'll go on to the next file. I guess that's the last one for today.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is. That would be file B2/2019P. If you would just give us a few moments, we do have an agent that we are adding in. That would be Mr. Craig Rowe. And we do have a lawyer representing the applicant as well. I believe it's Tom Richardson. Sorry, I can't see his name very well from this side. Please note that we are also just trying to work with one of our registered members of the public to get them access to the meeting. They're having some difficulty, so if you could just give us one moment, please.
Could I also ask you to maybe phone Bernie and put him through on how to unmute himself? So that I think for this meeting, we're going to need him to be able to speak. Thank you.
I'll take care of I'll take care of Bernie.
Thank you.
I have just sent an email for Mr. Young. Is that the one you're waiting for, Holly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I just sent that to Sarah. I'll forward that to you as well. If you could send her the invite again.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Young has forwarded me her email address. Her phone number, so we would be able to call her and have her on speakerphone.
She would like to try and Zoom in again. So I've just texted you her email address. If you could try that. And I will call Member Law.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps you could just give us a 5-minute recess so we can get Mr. Law unmuted. Yes. That would be appreciated.
I would grant it. We'll have a 5-minute recess until we get a few items back online. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, just to give you an update, we do have all three pre-registered members of the public with us, but we do seem to still be working with Mr. Law. So if we could just give us just a little bit more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. I was muted, sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Will we have all three? Yeah, I see. Who will be the spokesperson for the applicant?
For the upcoming applicant, I do know that we have Craig Rowe. He is the agent. I understand he would be having Jason Schooley join him, which is the engineer for the applicant. And I do believe their lawyer, Tom Richardson, is also joining us. So the three of them will be representing the applicant in this application.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Now,
Yes,
now-
Mr. Law, we can now hear you. Thank you.
I can. Okay, thank you, dear. Okay. Sue?
Okay, Bernie, leave your
Hi,
computer.
welcome back. Susan, can you answer the phone? Here.
Through you, Mr.
Sorry
Chair,
for that.
we look
Go ahead,
good.
Holly.
If you would like to conclude our recess, and then I can start in on the PowerPoint.
Now that we are ready to move on, I would ask that we, how shall we say, finish with the recess and start with the matters at hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will just give us one moment. We're just sharing our screen for the PowerPoint. Thank you. Participants are reminded, ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you'll be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you'll be removed from the meeting. Participant microphones and video cameras will remain off until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphone will be muted. Once the voting on the item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you will be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note, comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Application for consent. File B2/2019P, 204 Canberra Road. The subject parcel shown as Part 2 on the attached sketch is an interior portion of 204 Canberra Road, Parts 1 and 2, lying south of Canberra Road and west of Oak Ridge Boulevard in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to convey a 343-meter square easement, Part 2, in perpetuity in favor of Part 3 for the purpose of discharging storm water. Parts 1 and 2 will be retained for the continued use of a single detached residential dwelling known as 204 Canberra Road. Note, there is an existing storm sewer easement in favor of the town of Pelham located within the valley, Part 1. Town Council has also approved the site plan agreement for townhouse development at 190 Canberra Road, Part 3. To date, the following comments have been received. Public Works Department comments. advises the applicant that a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parcels will be required at site plan control, demonstrating that drainage neither relies on nor negatively impacts neighboring properties, and that all drainage will be contained within the respective lots to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Note, the site plan approval was granted on July 13, 2020 by bylaw number 4258-2020. In addition, we have received an additional memo by the Director of Public Works. I will read that into the record now. To whom it may concern, the Committee of Adjustment meeting is to speak specifically on the easement required to convey stormwater runoff from 190 Canberra Road across the subject lands, 204 Canberra Road, by means of an existing watercourse. This easement is required to service Part 3, 190 Canberra Road, in accordance with the site plan agreement previously approved by Council. The planning process for this development has been ongoing for several years and has included a zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of condominium approval, and site plan agreement. There have been extensive studies and drawings considered as part of the process, and input from various agencies such as the Niagara Region and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority have been considered. The design for the stormwater management system was undertaken by Upper Canada Consultants, and the engineering reports and drawings have been reviewed by town staff, Niagara Region, and Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. All concerns have been rectified regarding proposed mitigation measures, and all agencies have given their consent for the development. Bell Canada, no concerns. Hydro One, no concerns. Niagara Region. Regional environmental planning staff note that there are no natural heritage concerns on the subject lands. The NPCA is the lead agency for natural hazards associated with valley slopes, and therefore the region defers to the NPCA as it relates to the conveyance of stormwater runoff down the valley slope. No objections subject to local and other planning requirements pertaining to the valley slope hazards, as there is concern that the proposal may include vegetation removal. Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. No objections to the proposed stormwater outfall in the existing channel provided an easement is established over 204 Canberra Road, and all NPCA work permits are obtained prior to commencement of site works. Any mitigation measures suggested by the environmental impact statement prepared by Beacon Environmental will be required or implemented through the NPCA work permit process. NPCA work permit number 2019003337 for the purposes of stormwater outfall construction was issued on July 8, 2020, subject to the establishment of an easement in favor of 190 Canberra Road. Public comments. Concerns with stormwater affecting the forested area and over 20 different bird species living in the area. Response. The EIS 2015 conducted by Beacon Environmental identified 25 species of breeding bird. No interior forest or area sensitive species were noted. None of the records specifies any species listed on the Schedule of Endangered Species Act or are considered provincial or regionally rare species. The developer is required to maintain the same pre-development stormwater flows exiting Part 3 into the valley lands, which will minimize impact on the woodland. Concern about losing bird species, trees as a result of the development. Response. The townhouse development is limited to the table lands area already disturbed area, which includes the former dwelling, driveway, and grasslands adjacent to the valley. The townhouse development maintains the valley lands in a natural state with no grading or vegetation disturbance below the physical top of slope or within the 7.5 5-meter setback. However, to accommodate stormwater control, a storm easement is requested to release water into an existing storm easement in the valley below the south. The proposed easement will have minimal impact on bird species and tree removal in accordance with the NPCA work permit. The valley land will be maintained in its natural state except for the area of proposed works, which will be rehabilitated in accordance with the NPCA work permit. Concern about drainage and recommends using a French drain system. Response. The stormwater management system has been designed by professional engineers and reviewed by town engineering staff, NPCA staff, and qualified ecologists who are satisfied the proposed stormwater management design meets relevant engineering and environmental standards and guidelines for mitigating any negative impacts. Concerns about drainage and design of storm system of adjacent subdivision and downstream impacts. Response. The design of the stormwater management system for the adjacent subdivision was designed in accordance with engineering requirements at that time. The proposed stormwater management system for the development of 190 Canberra Road, Part 3, is for post-development flow rates not to exceed pre-development flows. This design provision includes underground storage within the storm sewer and controls the rate of discharge at the outlet point, minimizing downstream impacts. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application file B2/2019P be approved, subject to the following conditions. That the applicant provide the Secretary-Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use of the issuance of the Certificate of Consent, and to provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary-Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary-Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary-Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, njbizzato@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found at the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, I do see that Ms. Weens, the Director of Community Planning and Development, has also joined the meeting. Of course, we do have our planner, Curtis Thompson, and we also do have the Director of Public Works, Mr. Jason Marr, here as well.
Okay, thank you. I will start with the applicant. I see Mr. Richardson and Mr. Roy. Either one, I give you the floor now to speak, and if you have any additional matters that you want to make us aware of.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, we want to be brief this afternoon. Generally, this is the last step in what's been a long run of development approvals to move this forward. I think the Director of Public Works had a great summary in his letter, noting that there has been a draft plan of condominium approved, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment for this property. The site plan agreement is ready to be executed at any time, and we do have an NPCA permit for the proposed stormwater outlet. That's the subject of the easement tonight. One of the conditions of our permit and being able to start works is we do need to secure this easement. So right now, the subject lands that are going to be developed as the condominium are owned by Dahan Homes. The president of that company owns the adjacent land for which the easement is going to be conveyed across. That's Mr. Dahan's property at 204 Canberra Road. There was an adjournment of this hearing back in, I believe, February or March of 2019 because we did not have supportive comments from the NPCA at the time. The original stormwater outlet for this involved disturbing the stable top of slope, which could not be supported. So over the course of a year, we worked with the NPCA to provide an overland drainage solution. So therefore, we're not cutting or altering the slope at all. Drainage will be controlled on site and then conveyed overland down into the valley. So really, this is something that we do have a permit to finish the works off. Our client is very eager to move forward with this development. And really what we're looking for from the committee tonight is the approval of that easement to be our final step in moving forward towards construction. We do know that there are some neighbors with some comments to provide this evening, but we strongly support staff's recommendation this evening. We echo the comments of the Director of Public Works in his memo and are certainly open to any questions that the committee members would have of us. I myself am a planner, but I do have with me just out of camera right now is Mr. Jason Schooley, our professional engineer, and Mr. Tom Richardson is legal counsel for Mr. DeHaan, and he's happy to address any perhaps legal questions about the easement between the two properties that you may have tonight.
Thank you. I'm noticing with all that is written, we've had professional engineers do the design work. So ultimately, they will be responsible for the design, and if there are any problems, it'll be their problem to rectify it. Am I right?
To Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. This has been vetted through numerous professionals, and I think that is the key point that we're trying to make. Is we've had multiple agencies reviewing this, and we've come to a solution here that everyone can support, that they feel safe. It's also supported by professionals outside of the engineering discipline of planning and also ecology as well. Certainly the site plan agreement, as well as the condominium agreement to follow, are going to have the necessary controls for maintenance of that easement. All the controls will be in place, and certainly if there are any problems that arise, it's incumbent on the engineer and the applicant and the owner to move forward and provide an immediate solution to the satisfaction of the town.
Now, you're going to have property owners surrounding that, and they have some concerns. Have you got anything to deal with their concerns should there be a problem arise down the road where maybe there is erosion or what have you? Have you come up with any kind of preparatory work or something where they could call and have this dealt with immediately before they have any damage done to their properties?
To you, Mr. Chair, certainly if there are any concerns from the neighbors, the MPCA is a regulatory authority for the creek down there. That's where our permit's been derived from. So if they feel something is off, they're within the right to contact the MPCA and request a site inspection of those works. We're confident in the design. There are measures and infrastructure that are going to be included as part of that drainage solution using different types of fabrics and textiles that prevent erosion. That's a key consideration when proposing any sort of drainage over a top of slope, and something that the MPCA has looked carefully at. So certainly if there's any concerns or anything that they feel that is having a negative impact on their property, certainly they're within their right to contact the MPCA and also the town as well, and that would be brought forward to the attention of the condominium corporation, who would take necessary steps if required.
If I could just add, Mr. Chairman, to emphasize those last remarks, the easement at the bottom of the slope, which already exists, not the easement you're being asked to create tonight, is owned by the town of Pelham. So that's the first body that would become aware of any complaint with respect to the water being conveyed at the bottom of the channel. The easement that you're being requested to create this evening would be the responsibility of the condo corporation. So it's not as though someone would have to deal with a group of townhouse owners. There will be a condominium corporation which will have the responsibility for this easement. And finally, it passes across one property, and that's the property of Mr. DeHaan, who of course is the principal of the development company, but he'll continue to retain the ownership of the home next door.
Okay, thank you. I ask either Bernie or Sandra, have you got any questions? Go ahead, Sandra.
Through the chair, this question is probably for Mr. Richardson. Typically, how long, if there's an issue identified with maintenance or something failing with the easement, typically how long does it take for a condo corporation to step in and make the repair?
I think that depends on the circumstances. The point that I'm making is that they should be able to respond in good time because they are a corporation. Typically, they retain a property management company, and that's who the complaint would go to. So there is a responsible, I'm going to call it agency. There is someone available to respond to concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I think that might help address some of the neighbors' concerns.
Yeah, Sandra, I was thinking the same. We want to make sure that neighbors have one phone call to make and that they don't have to wait through a series of different people's groups or whatever to get action to whatever complaint they have. We don't want to create a problem with this easement. Ernie, have you got any other comments?
If I could just interject, Mr. Chairman, that's why I emphasized that the existing easement at the bottom of the end of channel is already the ownership of the town. And I noticed some of the written comments that are before you today talked about it not being maintained. Well, that's the town's concern. But the easement you're being asked to grant down the slope, that is the one, if it fails or causes a problem of any sort, that's the one in which a call to the property management company for the condominium would receive a response.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bernie.
I'm grateful for these comments, and I'm grateful for being able to listen and read what the proposals are to help mitigate further soil and sand and going down. But your application really isn't the problem. I think the problem has occurred in the past 30 or 40 years of construction east of where your development is. And if you spoke about the stream downstream into Ridgeville, well, the stream is now full, it's plugged with silt, and it goes all the way down to Effingham. So the little ponds are filled. It's a shame what's happened, but that's not your concern. I understand now that we're only concerned about the water running off of your property, going over the existing drain down into Ridgeville. So I guess my only question is, during construction, is looking for a way to mitigate the silt from running off of your property into your drain and then going further on down into Ridgeville. That's my concern. We don't need any more silt going down. And I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'd like to question.
Could I direct that to Mr. Rowe and the engineer, Mr. Chairman?
Of course. I respectfully ask them to comment on this. Please go ahead, Mr. Rowe or Mr. Schooley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the committee member, there is a sediment and erosion control plan which forms part of the drawing set for this. So during construction, our standard mitigations require silt fencing and other erosion control methods. We're required to adhere by that plan, which has been approved by the town, and they do have the right of inspection that comes with that. So there is a full plan that's in effect to ensure that we're not providing any contamination down the hill through construction activities. And I will reiterate, the town does have the right of inspection on those works.
I must comment though, Bernie brought up a good point. You want a new easement. So you got more water coming and the water's flowing into an area where you have problems. It hasn't been maintained. So we're just gonna make the problem worse. I think we owe it to the people around it to make sure that we don't make the problem worse, maybe you should be talking to the town and getting everything set up. So according to good engineering practices, everything is, when you finish, the design is there and the controls are there and all the impediments are gone so that the neighbors can rest assured that they're not going to have any problems.
Certainly, and just a point of clarity to you, Mr. Chair, on this. Currently, the site does drain towards the valley. Through development, there's obviously impervious surface that's being added, but as alluded to in the director's memo, our post-development flows need to equal the pre-development flows. And part of the solution to manage the flow of water that comes out that could lead to erosion is through our on-site storage. We have oversized tanks that are going to hold that stormwater, and they're going to release it at an engineered time frame. So that'll ensure that we don't have any large deluges of water racing down the hill and causing any unnecessary erosion or surcharging of the stream. Those controls are in effect, and we do have approvals for them, and those will provide that necessary mitigation to ensure that we're not having a negative impact on that existing easement.
Fine, but we have also seen that we designed to the best of our ability, and we can have a very, very difficult storm that we have no way of understanding that could come. Have we got any kind of a backup plan in case you get hit with something that will overwhelm your design? And I'm not saying you made a bad design or anything. This is a fact of nature. If, we've seen this in the past. I ask that be addressed.
Through the chair, I'd like to comment or respond to that. We do have measures in place that will direct it in a safe manner through the development that we're proposing in the situation where we get an extreme event that's beyond all of the systems designs. And that would be something like a 1,000-year design storm that would be a concern. The new path easement that we're taking would be a less impact to creating erosion down the new proposed easement, going to then wouldn't fill in the existing one through erosion or of that nature. So we've going on site, chose a location that's mature, that has been there for many years, conveying water, overland water through that area. So the choice in the easement is not just, this is the easy location. This is the most practical and stable situation that we could find on the site.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear from you, that people understand that the design was done in such a way to cause the least amount of grief, that you've looked at it from all different angles. So anybody wanting to comment from the other side, they will have to deal with what you've dealt with already and show that either you're wrong or that they agree with it. I have no further comments. What about Sandra or Bernie? Bernie, go ahead.
Mr. Rowe, do you have plans to build a berm along the bottom of your property to slow down the water before it gets to the drain so that the silt might have a chance to settle down and just the water runs off? Is that too much to ask?
Well, I think, Mr. Schooley or Jason, I think you can comment on that. I think you just told me what you're going to do. You might as well explain it again, please.
Yes, further to Bernie's concern, the whole site has been designed to control the discharge of water through a storage system, as we've mentioned before. And prior to discharging, we're also cleaning any of the silts out of the water, any oils, other contaminants through a stormwater quality system. Once it discharges from the site into the easement area that we're proposing, it's going through a natural channel that exists there, and then we're reinforcing it also at the immediate outlets so that the velocities of the stormwater coming from the small pipe that's discharging this will not create any erosion as it goes down the bank to the flat tablelands at the bottom of this valley. So there should not be a need to do any additional stormwater controls on the proposal.
I think my concern goes back to what you said about the oil. Now, the oil would come off the paved parking lot. What I'm talking about is now prior to the paved parking lot, during the construction, if a storm should come, when the water runs off of your property down south and west, if we had a berm to hold the water up for, I don't know, a couple of feet, just to, if you know what I mean, just to hold the silt back from going down further into Ridgeville. I'm not certain if that's possible, but I think we should consider it.
Well, I'll ask Mr. Schooley to address that, please.
Through the chair, the design is during construction of the site servicing that's going to be proposed there, we will have cut off swales and little depressed areas before they discharge into the site, catch basins that are there. There'll be silt fence surrounding the site. There'll most likely be a rock check dam installed near the outlet just in the event during construction of the servicing occurs. Once the servicing is complete, most of the site will be graded to a point where, again, no water will discharge from the site and go onto any other body's property prior to going through the stormwater system that we've designed. After the construction of our houses, everything again will be maintained through the drainage system that we've designed to not create, we do not want to create any erosion from the installation of this development. It costs money to repair things, and that's what we're not there to do.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I understand what you're doing, Bernie. So, what about Sandra? Have you got any further comments?
Through the chair, I have no further comments.
Okay. Well, at this point, I don't have any further comments of these gentlemen. I think now we should bring in, if there's any person from the public that have any comments, I would say we bring them in now, let them speak in whatever order we have written here.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just give us one moment. We'll be bringing in Angela and Brian Young. They are the first members that have pre-registered to speak to the committee. Just give us one moment. We're just adding them into the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela and Brian. It seems that you have been added to the meeting. I do see that you are muted, so if you can unmute yourself.
There we go.
And we're just asking if you wish to share your camera, and then we can see you. If you would like to say yes, that's fine. And if you'd rather not, that's also okay. Oh, we see you now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just to let everybody know that we live at 206 Canberra Road, which is directly west of all of this development. Our major concern with this whole deal is water. We really don't want any water coming across our property. We have the valley down in the bottom end there, and we want to be able to ensure that that valley stays the way it is, and there's no additional water that comes across. And silt is the big concern too. I think there are a few misunderstandings that a lot of people may have with this whole development. There's been several references made to a creek. People are under the impression that there's a creek along this valley, and we've scoured the NPCA documents, and we've never found any information as to a creek in this location. So it makes a difference when you're talking about an existing water course versus a valley, a dry valley. So that's one of the concerns that we have, is even in the document that was generated by Upper Canada Consultants, they talk about a tributary of the Coyle Creek. So this is not the case, according to NPCA documents that we've scoured. So that may have an influence on people's perception of what's going on here. The other concern that we have is this easement that's being used, this existing easement that's being used, which will be added to with this new easement that's proposed. This existing easement ends at our property line. It does not continue across our property. That existing easement was designed to absorb all of the water generated off of Oak Ridge before it comes to our property. It was not designed to be added to or to have additional water put into it. So our major concern is there's going to be additional water put into that existing easement, and that water is going to have to go somewhere because we don't believe the existing easement has enough capacity to absorb all of that additional water. So this is the crux of our concern. We really don't want to have any additional water coming across our property. We do occasionally get it in the spring when the ground is still frozen. Water does come across our property at times if there's a large rainstorm or something like that.
Every 2 to 3 years.
It has been very minimal and it hasn't caused any damage.
In 10 years, it's been maybe 3 times.
Yeah. So that's a one-off. That's fine. You know, we can understand that because, you know, that's just the nature of the beast. What we don't want is we don't want to have additional water coming across.
Our valley it's dry. It's always dry. And Brian mows it every week all summer.
Yeah, you know, it has grass on it. You know, it's not, there's no channel through it or anything like that. So that's our major concern. The other concern that we have with this whole proposal, and we've unfortunately had to learn a lot about this stuff because it's all new to us. We haven't had to deal with this type of stuff before. And actually there is a lot of information out on the web about stormwater runoff. There's documents galore. NPCA has a beautiful document that outlines the best practices on dealing with stormwater runoff. So we've scoured that, and we've scoured several other documents on how this should be done. The major concern that we have is the calculations that were given by Upper Canada consultants on the pre-amount of flow coming off that property does not match what we believe it should be. The pre-amount of flow does not seem to correlate to what we've seen coming off that property. We've lived next door to the property for a while now.
10 years.
We've talked with neighbors butting onto that property. We've talked with the previous owner of that property. And what Upper Canada Consultants is saying, the pre-flow coming off that property is not seen by us or by these other people. So they're basing all of their numbers off of a model, which is the what do they call that model? The
rational model.
Yeah, modified rational method of calculating flow. This is a model that's used to give you a flow number off of a property based on how porous the soil is and how many existing buildings are on the property. And it comes up with a number that is what they call a coefficient number. And this number, we believe, is wrong. The coefficient that they're giving us does not seem to jive with what we've looked at. The soil type for that property is extremely porous. It's probably the most porous in Fonthill or even in Canada. It's given a number of a 0.05 to 0.10 coefficient, which is extremely low. It means it's a super absorbent. It's actually so absorbent, NPCA has classified it as a protected zone because water can flow down to the groundwater so quickly. The water flows through that soil just like nothing. So that soil porosity plus the existing amount of non-porous building roofs on the property comes up with a coefficient, they say, of 0.25 for the property, which is the flow rate for the whole property. We don't agree with that. We think it should be much lower because we did a measurement of all the roofs on that property using Niagara Navigator. If you've never used it, it's a great tool. You know, the town people would know about this. You can check the square meters of roofs and properties and everything else. So we did a calculation of all the properties on the site, and our calculation came out significantly lower than what Upper Canada consultants show. So this is number one reason why we have come up with that seems to indicate that the pre-flow condition that they're outlining is wrong. This pre-flow rate is what they base everything off of because the post-flow rate has to be the same. And they adjust their post-flow rate by controlling how much is coming out of their super pipe. So the rate that they show coming out is quite a large amount. There is a 120 millimeter diameter pipe that's going to be coming out of their super pipe, which is quite large. And this super pipe is going to have 90 cubic meters of water in it. When you get a large storm, that pipe will fill up to a certain degree, depending how much rain falls. And the flow coming out of that pipe could be almost extreme. Think of a fire hose. A fire hose is smaller than that. It's maybe only this big. Well, this is this big. And it's a huge volume of water. That pipe will empty in, I think it was 90 minutes I've calculated, based on the flow rate. So normally when these things are used, the flow rate is reduced so that it empties the super pipe at a slower rate than what they're showing it as. 24 hours would be a reasonable time frame. 90 minutes, that's a lot of flow, a lot of water coming through.
Talk about the numbers.
23.78 liters per second.
Which is 376 gallons per minute.
That's a huge amount of water coming out.
And is that going to be contained, and how?
So that's all going to flow down to our little town of Pelham easement,
which has not been maintained.
80 meters away from our property. There's no way that is going to be contained. That's going to be coming across our property. So that's our concern. That's the crux of it. So that's kind of what my concern is here.
Okay, I heard you loud and clear. Mr. Young.
Yes.
Are you a professional engineer registered in the province of Ontario?
I am not.
Have you considered hiring an engineer to go over what you have to see if what you say is correct?
Yes, certainly. Why not?
Yeah, these are just numbers. There's a lot of information on the web. We've probably spent a week, okay?
At least
a week scouring the web, and there's tons of good information out there. So we've actually educated ourselves to a certain degree.
Well, self-education is one thing, but I'll be blunt. I've known these engineers, and they've done a design.
Yes.
They're professionals. This is what they do for a living every day. I appreciate when things are brought to me. I have no problem listening to you, but I need to know that you're a professional and that you know what you're talking about. I'm putting it bluntly. I know these gentlemen, they wouldn't be registered. They wouldn't be involved in the business they are if they weren't, and they are considered experts in the field. So if you want to contradict them and say that they're wrong, you have to bring someone of equal footing to look at what you have and tell them that they're wrong.
Okay, well, I'm just basing what I'm seeing off of the document that was presented to us. And to me, I looked through this document and I saw discrepancies, okay? And the discrepancies are things as simple as saying before outletting to a tributary of the Coyle Creek. Well, where are they getting this from?
Well, let me put it another way. We have the Director of Public Works here, Mr. Marr, and he's also a professional engineer. I'll ask him, are you satisfied with the work that Mr. Schooley and company have done with the design? Are you prepared to allow them to have the responsibility and the respect that they knew what they were doing?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, first, I do appreciate the level of detail of work that's been undertaken by the resident. I first would like to say that the town does have responsibility for maintenance of the original easement. I'm not aware of any deficiencies related to that easement, but definitely that would be a town responsibility to make sure that easement is in good shape and conveying the drainage water as designed. With respect to the application and the engineering behind it, I have reviewed the documents. I have reviewed the functional service study. I do believe that good engineering principles were used in the design. I have read the comments and feedback from the NPCA and from Niagara Region, and we rely on, when we're outletting into a naturalized environment like that, we do rely on the advice and opinions of specifically the NPCA, and they are in favor of this application and the design that has been completed. So to answer your question, yes, I am in support of the engineering work that has been done for this development.
Thank you. I must, I don't want to get in trouble for this, but I have a real problem with people going to the internet and saying and reading information, and then all of a sudden they become very knowledgeable. I guess we can do that, say that, we do that. I've seen that people get medical advice and read and all kinds of things. And I have to say, I can't be swayed unless I have a person of equal stature having commented on it and playing. So as far as I'm concerned, I have to respect and accept Mr. Schooley's information, his design. And if there's a huge problem, then he's got a problem. And I guess that's the way I look at it from my end. And the way Mr. Marr wanted, we're only looking at the easement that they want in question, and what is being said by the engineers. It's not going to cause any problems as to, Mr. Young, what you think is. So I mean, we can't decide that we're going to engineer this project here today ourselves and tell them, Upper Canada, we're not going to accept your design. We're going to make our own design and come up with a different way. We either have to go with the design and just tell them that they're responsible for whatever happens. And I don't know what else I can say to you on that matter. And I don't know if Bernie or Sandra have anything else to add to that. Okay.
For the chair,
go ahead, Mr. Young.
I'm basically pleased with the comments that Mr. Rowe has brought to the table. And they are concerned about the water runoff, I think, as much as we are. So I think in good business practice, I think they're going to do a good job. That's their job. And if down the road we have an issue, I think we have to go back to the construction. And I think we have good people as the owners that are not going to try to destroy the valley or destroy anyone's backyards. And I would think that if something should come up that Mr. and Mrs. Young are not happy with, I'm sure the builder, the owner, will step in and try and rectify what's happened.
I would, Bernie, I'd like to add one thing. Mr. Richardson said that, but I'd like to hear Mr. Marr say that. If there is a problem, and Mr. and Mrs. Young aren't happy, who do they contact, and can they be assured at least that there will be immediate action to take care of whatever problem there is?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So like I said, the town is responsible for the easement at the toe of the slope, the existing easement. If there was any issues related to the conveyance of water through that easement, the town would be responsible for taking that call and making those modifications and rectifications. As Mr. Schooley said, if there was an issue directly with the outlet and the easement on part 2, which leads down to our easement, then that would be something that would have to be dealt with the condo corporation. And then if the residents weren't happy with the action that was taken there, I'm sure that the town would be made aware of that, and we would start to look into those concerns for the residents as well.
Mr. Marr, I think, being a private citizen myself, I think what Mr. and Mrs. Young would like to know is that they don't have to call the condo or anybody. They'd like to know that they just have to call the town, talk to one person, and no matter whose responsibilities, the town will take leadership and get the problem resolved. And if they have to call the condominium corporation or whatever they call them, because we all know that once there's a number of people responsible, that phone calls are told, phone this, phone that, phone that. I'm sure this is what they're trying to avoid. If there's a problem, they want to know they can get it fixed. And I don't think that's too much for them to ask. So how can we give them some kind of assurance that they only have to make one phone call and get the thing resolved?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're all taxpayers here. And when we receive a number of different complaints on many different files and issues, and the town is responsible for following up with those. And our elected officials make sure that happen as well.
Mr. and Mrs. Young, I've tried to satisfy you, and I've tried to satisfy. Can I at least say that I've made you feel a little better about the situation like that?
Yeah, that does make us feel better, because that was one of our concerns, was if there is a problem, you know, who do we deal with here? Do we deal with the neighbor? Do we deal with the condo corporation because they're the ones maybe causing it? Or do we deal with the town because they're using the town easement? So it wasn't clear as to who would help resolve the problem. Now we know we can go to the town if there's a problem, and that makes us a lot more comfortable. It's like, hey, town, there's a problem. And you guys can sort it out or whatever. So that will help a lot. You know, just one of the concerns that not a concern, but suggestions that I might offer to you guys, to the engineers, is at the head wall coming out of that super pipe, I don't know why you would just have just 120 millimeter orifice. Why don't they have several orifices, smaller to start and larger higher up, so that as the pipe fills up, you start using those larger orifices. For a small amount of rain, just go through a 2-inch orifice instead of a 120 millimeter orifice. It would reduce the flow on small rainfalls, but still allow you to have capacity on a larger rainfall. Just an idea, you know.
Mr. Schooley, could you address that for Mr. Young, please?
In a short, as simple as I can make this, the major control is up at the top, up in the main roadway area. And the reason that we have that where it is so it's maintainable, accessible from that perspective, where most of the stormwater management is happening. The pipe coming from the main roadway down beside the unit over across to this outlet is minor outflows from the site, which is the control flows. And what we're trying to do in that methodology also is we're trying to reduce the velocities before it enters the environment. So we're trying to slow the water down as much as we can so it comes out of there in a manageable direction so that we don't cause any erosion immediately on the outlet of the pipe, because the pipe doesn't erode. We just don't want the soil to erode around it. So that's sort of what's happening there. And the methods that we've shown are, you know, we have energy dissipations in each of the manholes and a few other things to help mitigate any high flowing, high velocity water.
Thank you. I would like to mention they have, Mr. Young, gone through the design. I understand that energy of water is what they're kind of, but I also want to make you aware of that. I talked to Mr. Schooley. If you get 1,000-year or some real ridiculous storm, which are happening now, we can't get upset right away. We have to understand that we can only design to a certain level. There could be, maybe not, maybe in 10 years, you could have a real freak storm. So beware that not everything is perfect. There is always have to make an allowance for the unknown. And I'll rest there. If there's no more questions from our committee, what I'd like to do is I gather there are other people that want to speak, unless you, Mr. or Mrs. Young, have any more comments to make. I don't want to cut you out.
I think that, you know, I think we've probably covered about as much as we can. And, you know, I understand your concern with me not being an engineer to, you know, and not having the qualifications to present an argument. You know, I'm just a layperson, okay? But I can see
Well,
that I understand, you know, so.
Allow me to say this. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm looking at evidence. And evidence provided when two people, they have to be in the same field. If they disagree, that's totally different. But one person isn't in that field and another one is, that's a little different. I'm not trying to belittle you, and I apologize if I made you feel bad. That was not my intent, okay? So my intent was to explain why the system the way it is, and also that I want you to be happy that you now know who to call, and you were heard loud and clear. It's all documented, and I hope that I've made you feel better today. That's my main concern. I addressed your concern. That's the key. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, thank you. We do have another member of the public who's pre-registered, and we're just bringing Ben into the meeting now, so just give us just one moment. Okay, we do see that he's in the meeting. We're just sending you, Ben, asking you to unmute. You should get a little pop-up saying, please unmute. Please say okay or yes. Ben, are you there? If you could just acknowledge, it is showing me on my screen that you're unmuted. So if you could just speak, sir. Through the chair, I do have his phone number. I will just give him a phone call. We did have this issue in testing as well where he could see and hear us, but for some unknown reason we weren't able to hear him. So I will just phone him and put him on my speakerphone.
You want a 5 minute? Would you like a 5 minute break? There's no problem.
Hi Ben, I have you on the phone. I'm just going to put you on speakerphone. Just give me one moment. Hi Ben, it's Holly from the town of Pelham. If you want to go ahead, I have you on speakerphone and you can speak to the committee.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm glad to be able to join, not by visual, but at least by sound.
Sorry, just 1 second, Ben. Committee members, can you hear him?
I can hear him. It's not the best. What about the other members? Sandra, you all right? Ernie, you okay?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead, Ben.
Okay, Ben, please go ahead, but if you could just speak up just a little bit louder, we would appreciate it.
Okay, I get echo. So should I directly speak into my phone? Is it good to you? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. As I said, through you, Mr. Chair, my concerns are not about the water that I will not be affected by this water, but I am concerned about the people that will be affected if there is an excess of water. And I have brought the idea forward, and I'm not sure if the engineers considered this at all. Mr. Schooley, who I actually do know, may consider, but at least could answer the question that I have. The container that they, or a holding tank that they will construct, will that have a solid bottom, or will it be perforated to help this minimize the water outflow in the valley? That is my main question. Second question is not to use large equipment to build this pipe in the east way going down the valley to minimize the destruction of trees that are on the slope. That are my questions.
Mr. Ben, in what capacity? Did you say you live right near there? Or are you representing some people, or why are you involved in this?
I live directly behind here, and I consider that the area is unique because of the very permeable soil and could minimize the runoff by constructing a holding unit that is perforated at the bottom or even the sides to minimize the water runoff.
Are you speaking as a professional engineer here or just as a citizen of the town of Pelham?
I am a citizen of the town of Pelham. I have 65 years of experience in construction.
That's not the question. Are you a professional engineer?
I'm not a professional engineer. I asked the engineer if they consider that idea.
Okay, I will ask Mr. Schooley. You've heard this gentleman here. You have made your design. Is there any merit to what he says, or is there any reason to consider it? I've heard quite extensively your design, but I'll leave that question up to you to answer to this gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through the chair. When we went through the design of this project, there was always the condition of the slope stability. Slope stability study that was originally done for this project was very clear to not inject additional stormwater point loading anywhere within the slope so that it wouldn't impact the slope stability. So that was through our design, was to minimize the injection of groundwater into the soils in the area. Now, as you can see on the plans, or I guess you wouldn't be able to see them, but through the site plan process, we ensured that, made sure that all the roof water leaders are directed to landscape areas. We're not projecting any pipe systems from the roof water. So we're trying to infiltrate the clean water coming from the sky on hitting the roof and directing it into the ground via the grass surfaces, which for the most part happens on every house in the area. Again, we didn't use a perforated pipe system here because the system is located in the roadway system, which is we have a roadway system, then we have dwellings, and then we have the valley slope. We didn't want to impact the basements of the proposed dwellings by injecting the storm water into the ground to try to assist it to move through the soil. Ben is correct in some ways that the soil is sandy there, and the previous public person, Mr. Young, it is sandy, but it's not the sandiest soil. There's a different soil complexes throughout Fawn Hill. This is one of the more siltier soil complexes, so it does not infiltrate water as well as the other soil complex that exists on the other side of the valley, where Concord Street is, even the soil complex that exists on the other side of the other valley to the north on Highway 20 area. So there's differences in soils in the area, which we considered when we did this design.
Thank you, Mr. Schooley. I think you made one very important point. When you looked at the site, you looked at everything. The soil conditions, the slopes, everything else. So I need the people to be assured that you've done a thorough research of what you're doing. So Ben, do you understand what Mr. Schooley has been telling you here?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. What was your other question again, please? Pardon my forgetfulness. I'm at that age where I gotta sometimes have the same question asked twice.
The concern about the destruction of growth of trees on the slope by using them, minimize the destruction by doing the hand trenching, since it is not required to go very deep because it doesn't have to be frost-free or anything like that. That's my question.
Mr. Schooley or Mr. Rowe, I mean, you guys, it's your design. I'm assuming you're going to be supervising whatever work is done. And I don't, if this job isn't being put out for tender or whatever, you can put certain specifications in whatever construction is to make sure that, based on what Ben says this is how you're going to work and this is how you're going to do it. Could I ask you to address Ben's concern and say, yes, you could do that to make sure that damage is minimized by having a tight spec and a good supervision? Go ahead, Mr. Schooley.
Ben may be, as Ben would know, he probably looked at the plans and stuff from 2019, February, with the first easement that was going down right straight through the valley system, which the Conservation Authority rejected. And then we changed the drainage design to go to a less obtrusive area. So minimize less damage to the environment. We're only now going in and going to be putting a head wall approximately 3 meters away from the property line into the easement, just to minimize. We found a location that would minimize to limit the tree removal and shrub removal to about 2 or 3 species at that one location. So what we've designed and proposing to put in there is extremely less obtrusive to the environment that's there beyond the development area. And again, we probably have Ari Dahan, the owner, has also hired probably one of the best contractors in the peninsula to do the work for him. So, and we will be there with full supervision through this process as required by the work permit from the MPCA.
Fine. Does that satisfy you, Ben?
Yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Now
thank
I
you,
say,
Ben.
Holly,
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Chair.
is there another person that wants to speak to this?
Yes, there is, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you. Goodbye, Ben. We do have another member of the public who's pre-registered. That is Ms. Nora Pete, and we'll just be bringing her into the meeting room now. If you can just give us a minute. Okay, Ms. Pete, I do see you. If you could just unmute yourself, or we might just be requesting that you unmute. Just 1 second, Ms. Pete. We are just going to send you a message asking you to unmute. You should get a little pop-up on your screen. Oh, perfect. Thank you. We can hear you.
Okay.
I will, Laura, give you the floor now. I ask you, what are your concerns with regard to this?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concerns are similar to Brian and Angela Young's. And Mr. Chair, you made a comment, which I will quote here. You said, you asked Brian if he had evidence provided by people in the field. And without intending disrespect to anyone here, I will point out that the evidence provided by people in the field that the committee is working on have been provided by people in the field who are paid by the developer. And that's worth bearing in mind. I am not casting aspersions. I'm just saying it needs to be kept in mind.
You're hitting a nerve there. I'm going to address that right now.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe it's your place to make...
No, what I'm going to say, we get hired. They get hired by anybody, and they work. But when you're hired, you have to do the job and do it the way the building code and everything has to be done. It's not as if that you do something based on the fact that who hired you and that you're going to stretch it anyhow. So I don't want to go there. We're not going to go.
I am glad to hear that that is the case. I am completely glad to hear that that is the case.
And I can assure you of that.
However, my concern is with facts as stated in the report that I have in front of me from Upper Canada Consultants. They start, as Mr. Young pointed out, twice in this 3-page report, they specifically state an incorrect fact. They call it a fact. It is not true. They say that there is a tributary of Coil Creek in that gully along the existing easement that belongs to the town of Pelham. That is not and never has been a tributary of Coil Creek. So you have an expert's report here that completely posits its argument on incorrect information. And I think that that is really significant because there is not a running waterway, there is not in the landscape access for that kind of a running waterway there. And that's my first problem. Now, you also made a comment, and if you want to know where, that's in, on the first page and on the third page. I can find the paragraphs for you if you want, but they specifically state that.
Well, would you mind if we address that issue right now? Is there such a stream, or where did they get this from?
I don't know. There never has been such a stream there.
Mr. Rowe, would you address where you got these streams? They said there was 2 items. She said that you were wrong. There's no such stream.
To Mr. Chair, to that point, it's my recollection on this file that the classification of this cut in the land being a tributary of the Coil Creek system was provided to us by our ecologist. I'm certain I am not a qualified biologist or ecologist, so I would temper my comments trying to make an assumption of what constitutes a tributary versus what does not constitute a tributary, and whether or not it requires full-time water being conveyed at all times.
Is this a nomenclature problem?
I would agree with that.
No, I don't think it is a nomenclature problem, because if you have an existing tributary, it, by the nature of the landscape, is designed to carry a larger water flow. There's no doubt, and it is certainly correct, that this area is part of the drainage basin that feeds Coil Creek, but that area does not now and never has functioned as an active flowing water tributary. And that, I think, is a significant difference.
Are you saying
the second comment, Mr. Chair,
are you saying that the engineer's design is deficient?
I'm saying that I think that that is one reason for believing that the engineer's design may not be adequate. If it is based, if it's based on, excuse me, I do not wish to hear any more comments from you that you want only to hear from the professionals. Other people have possibly more of a stake in the good of the community and the good of the landscape than the professionals involved. Whether or not those professionals have professional liability should there be a problem. And that is something I will address shortly. The second comment that you made that I think is throws a light on an issue here is you said we can only design to a certain level. And I agree, that is true. However, my understanding is that the water flow rates on which this design is based, according to this report, derive from rainfall and stormwater figures from years that are not now relevant. I believe that the information gathered goes back to the 70s and ends more than 15 years ago. Now, we all know that within the last 5 and more years, there has been a major change in how the climate is working. In cases where once there was what we would call a once in 100 years storm, now sometimes they happen 3 years in 5 instead of 1 year in 100. So my point is that I think it behooves us to use up-to-date figures when designing a runoff plan in a situation like this. This is a very, very fragile area. I know, I live on one and have done for years, and it has been totally destroyed by exactly this kind of problem. Now, not only do I believe these data are outdated, seriously outdated, I believe the data was collected not even in and around Font Hill, but in a somewhat different rainfall area. And that's, the engineers can speak to that. I will, the proposed easement drains into the existing easement that the town has responsibility for. We have agreed on that. And you went to considerable effort to define whose responsibility damage would be relative to too much overflow. It's clear to me that if the town makes a decision that does not take the possibility of more runoff than is suggested in this report, because it is based on faulty or outdated information, and that means that there is far more water flow into that easement, the town's easement, than is presently anticipated, and damage is thereby caused, I think it should be clear that the town would be responsible for any monetary damages thereby arising. Which means, to my mind, that the town's agents, that's the committee and the council, need to be particularly careful in looking at the data on which their decision is based. And I would suggest that it is, in fact, the committee's responsibility to obtain independent reports and possibly to look for reports or input from the kind of insurance companies that we hear all the time these days are screaming because of the amounts they're having to pay out because of never anticipated storm and rainwater damage because of global warming. So I think that I do not think it is fair to request someone like Mr. Young to pay for those kind of reports. I think that that is the committee's responsibility. And bear in mind that as a committee, you represent me as a citizen and a taxpayer, and Mr. Young as a citizen and taxpayer. You represent all of us as taxpayers. And that's what I have to say.
And thank you for that. Mr. Schooley, would you address Ms. Sarah Leach's comment there that the rainfall data that you used in your design could possibly be wrong or taken from a wrong text or whatever, and explain to us how you, remember I asked you, we talked 1,000-year storm, but try and make her feel, shall we say, secure in your design. Please go ahead.
The rainfall data that's used for works in the past in the town of Pelham either use the St. Catharines rainfall data, which is many years and statistically proven to be somewhat correct. The same with the data from the well and systems too. The town of Pelham has recently created or uses the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Transportation's modeling systems, which show a different statistical method of determining rainfall, design rainfall events. The same numbers come out of the machine, as you want to say, in a design perspective, with the information that we've used and what is currently being used. As an engineer, we ensure that we protect the public and we ensure that we're using the most relevant information that's available to us. So I'm very confident that that rainfall event that we did use in the modeling, the design that we have, is applicable to this site.
Mr. Chair, could I address, is this Mr. Rowe?
Well, there's two people there. There's Mr. Schooley, who's the professional engineer, and the planner is Mr. Rowe. And
yes, who was that who just
asked me the question, and I will direct it to
Mr. Chair, could you please ask whoever was speaking? I don't know if that was Mr. Schooley or Mr. Rowe.
That was Mr. Schooley, the professional engineer.
Thank you. Could you ask him if I am understanding him clearly that the data collected for St. Catharines is the same or applies to Font Hill? That's question one. And question two, whether in fact any of the rainfall data includes data from 2005 to 2020.
Mr. Schooley, I think that question is best answered by you. I just heard what I understand what you're saying. If you could put it in a more precise way as to how you deal with this data and how up to date it is.
The data that we use for design rainfall events is continuously updated through the Ministry of Transportation design model for the province of Ontario, using as much data as they can possibly get for different regions of the province. So this is relatively up to date. I don't know statistically how the modeling was created to create a design storm parameters for the Welland and St. Catharines weather stations that they've used also that may have been referenced in the past. As again, I said, the town is just, we typically use and reference back to recent MTO data to ensure that we are still using design parameters that are applicable today.
Mr. Chair, I also want to know whether, and I think that Mr. Schooley may not know because he has clearly, he's been given a model by somebody in Niagara, or the Ministry of Environment, perhaps, that the Ministry of Environment says, here, this works for you. I'm wondering whether he knows whether any account has been taken in that data with the kinds of projections that people are making around global warming weather changes. And I think it's no fault of his if he hasn't. It just means that you may be making a decision on an inadequate model.
Well, I think I tried to address that earlier, but I'll address it again. Mr. Schooley, you've made your design. Is it 100% foolproof? Are we going to be subject to a freak storm that none of us have any chance of predicting? And was your design based on the best data that you have available given by the various government agencies? I guess that's the way to answer it.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, the problem is that the freak storms now happen all the time.
Well, we can't get involved in it because we can't do anything about it. That is not our.
Well, we can plan for the possibility. And I will again point out that if we don't plan for the possibility and there are problems arising, then the town of Pelham will be financially and legally responsible.
Rather than we're spending a lot of time on what I'd like to ask you, Nora. You've heard me with the Youngs and that I've secured the Youngs. I made them feel that who they can call. We've gone through the design and everything else. We've already had the town official say he's happy with the engineering design. He accepts it. They've already gone through with the Conservation Authority and they accept it. I think with people in know that are professionals that understand what's going on, I says, I don't understand now what problem you could have with what we've gone through.
Well, my problem, as I said, is that I think that the report on which the planning is based has inaccurate foundations. And that, not surprisingly, makes me question the value of the entire report. That's all.
Okay, I will leave it there. Okay, have you got any other further questions?
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate your input. Okay, and I hope I didn't upset you or interject too often. Okay, we appreciate you coming and informing us of your feelings. We're very thankful.
They're not feelings. These are not feelings. These are observations.
Well, I use the word synonymously. So.
Well, they are different things, and I would appreciate you to remember that.
Fine, I will take that into consideration. Okay, thank you. Now, I have no further comment. What about Bernie or Sandra? Do you have any further questions to ask?
Through Mr. Chair, I will just check the email address to see if we've received any comments live, and then you would be free, if not, to close the public portion.
Yeah, I'll wait for you for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is 6:06 and we have not received any comments from the public. So if you wished to close the public portion of the meeting, you would be able to do so.
The public portion of the meeting. And I will ask, do I have anyone on the committee that will make a recommendation to grant or not grant? Sandra, Bernie? Sandra.
I'll make the application for granting of an easement over Part 2 to the benefit of Part 3 for the use of discharging stormwater. Parts 1 and 2 are to be retained for residential use. Granting that decision subject to the following conditions: to the satisfaction of the Secretary Treasurer, provide a registrable legal description and copy of deposited reference plan, if applicable, and the final certification fee of $395 to be paid. The reasons for the decision are the application conforms with the policies of the town's official plan, regional policy plan, provincial policy statement, and complies with the town zoning bylaw. The decision has regards for sections 5124, 5125 of the Planning Act, and the Committee of Adjustment has considered the written and oral submissions, and subject to the conditions, finds the application meets the Planning Act criteria and is consistent with the planning policies, all provincial, regional, and town.
Thank you, Sandra. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I second Sandra's.
Thank you. So all those in favor of granting, would you please raise your hand? Move that it is granted. And I would now say that's the end of the file 204, file B2/2019. And I thank you all for making your presentation and giving us the comfort to deal with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair and Committee. Have a good evening.
Pardon? Oh, okay.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Okay, that's no problem.
Take care.
And I hope you don't mind me. I'd like to say hello to Mr. Richardson. I haven't seen him in a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you conducted a superlative meeting. You've handled everything very, very well, in my opinion. I'm glad to have been a part of it tonight.
And I appreciate it. And I just want to know we have to satisfy all people. I found that the people that came here had some very good points and they had to be addressed. And I thank Mr. Marr. I think he was very, very important to have him here to address, and he gave them major comfort. If you notice, the people went away because Mr. Marr was able to comfort them. And I think I hope that we've all walking away from here in a win-win situation. And I will say now, I think we can, Holly, is it all right now? We can call the meeting to an end and wish everyone a good day?
Yes, through you. Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We have no minutes for adoption. So if you would like to get a motion for adjournment, that would be acceptable.
Could I have an emotion? Yes, Sandra.
Make the motion to adjourn.
And all in favor? Vote. Okay. And thanks, Mr. Marr. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you today.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. Much appreciated.
So everybody.